celebration of the life of Brian Gaffrer. Apologies to those of you who have been trying to get online and get to this service. We had a few technical difficulties, but hopefully you are gathered with us wherever you are, and it's good that that is the case. And thank you all for being here today. My name is Will Sparks, and it is such an honor to be here and to celebrate a man I have known for the last 5 years, but many of you have known for a lifetime. Thank you for being here in person, gathering online. I know that your presence and your support makes a huge difference to Joanna and Paula and their families, to Doreen and to all of Brian's dear friends. It's just really good to be able to gather in this way. Thank you for making that possible through vaccination, and thank you for wearing your masks. That makes it safe for all of us. Those that speak from here will take off their masks so that they can be heard, but then we will be putting our masks back on again. After the service, we'll not be able to gather for the usual kind of reception that we're used to doing due to COVID. Brian would have loved to arrange to host you, to raise a glass together. So I'm going to ask you to be as safe in your interactions as you can here, wear your mask, and maybe then sometime later today, whoever you're with, fill up a glass of whatever and toast Brian, and toast a life well lived. We are here to remember that life and to give thanks for Brian's life and for the particular light that came into the world because he was here. We're here to give thanks to his Maker. We're here to grieve the loss of him. And we're here to remember and hold on to convictions that we have by faith that love is somehow bigger, somehow stronger, somehow more expansive than our immediate experience, somehow eternal. Much of Brian's way of engaging with life was done musically. The language of music spoke more eloquently than any other language to him. So today there will be a lot of music. Much of it played including Brian, and some live played by longtime friends and colleagues, and I want to thank you all for that. So let's begin hearing Mahler's Zwei blauen Augen, Two Blue Eyes of My Beloved. Let us join together in prayer. O God, in whose love and power the world took shape, and we are born and we live our lives and we die, hear our gratitude as we gather to celebrate the gift of life, and in particular the gift of Brian. Oh, those over second decades ago, the first note of an amazing song rang out across the Saskatchewan prairie, and so many beautiful notes and rhythms and chords and melodies issued from there. Oh God, let this time we share today do what your gift of music did for Brian all through his life. Let it bring joy, let it bring tears, let it heal wounds and lift hearts. Let this be together a song of gratitude to you, O God, our source and our everlasting home. Amen. So I want to invite you into a time to remember Brian, and as it turns out, there's more than a few people who would love to contribute to a remembering of Brian. And so a call went out a little bit, and a few people sent some tributes by video. We can do that these days, and so that has been strung together into some tributes from Brian's friends.
Brian, this is a toast to you, to say thank you for our friendship these past decades. I'm thankful for things that you taught me, not consciously perhaps, but by example, to speak out when there's been an injustice and to always do what I can to help others. One of my fondest musical memories together was singing a solo piece at the launch of Laverne's CD project to help raise money for the homeless that we performed at St. Andrews Wesley with you on horn and Joanna on flute, both in the orchestra. I also enjoyed getting to go hear jazz with you, both big band style and more intimate jazz trio out in Port Moody with a fine meal to go with the music, and wine, of course. I treasure the Miata road trips that we got to do together in our own cars at first, and then later just in mine, often combining it with a nice lunch together as well. I'm sorry I never got to golf with you or to experience cruising together, but I guess that's for another lifetime. I will always remember the twinkle in your eye, a twinkle that all your grandkids seem to have inherited. Also your dry sense of humor that you shared both in person and later when ALS restricted your moving around via email. Always a highlight in the day to see what humor you found to share. I will miss you, Brian. May good scotch and wine follow you wherever you are. And it's been a privilege to be your friend. Cheers.
For those that don't know me, my name is David Cousins. I'm honored to be here. I've had a hard time doing this, besides the emotional part. How does one encapsulate a person, a life, a spirit in just a few words? I think in snippets, so I'll try to paint the picture that way for you. Seeing Brian's name on yet another email joke coming through, smiling, rolling my eyes, or just laughing. Having a nice glass of red wine mid-afternoon, enjoying the sun and clinking our glasses to something. Ditto on nice glasses of scotch. Being out on the back deck. Music. Anything from NYO, VSO, road trips to Kamloops, Denton horns, flugelhorns, to not being able to play. Regardless, we talked, we reminisced, again rolled our eyes and smiled and laughed. Laverne. We started from there and continued to grow from there. Lots of love. The girls, always part of the conversation, always close. Questioning about what there could be afterwards. And then Brian winning the lottery at Laverne's gospel choir concert. Was that a sign? I have such respect for Brian. He had seen the devastation of ALS. He knew what was ahead. He was able to choose this time of his journey and to do it with dignity. There was even more humor involved. I hope Brian's harp lessons are going well. After so many years of horn playing, he really deserves a change. Go in peace, my friend. Adios.
Hi, my name is Ray, and I was a former horn student of Brian's during my teenage years growing up in Vancouver. And I had the great pleasure of studying with Brian for 4 years during that time. And I have Brian to thank always for the huge amount of care and patience he took with me during my development as a young and inexperienced horn player. Brian was the one to introduce me to so many new ideas and opportunities, not only for my musical development, but also teaching me discipline, which I very much needed at the time as a teenage boy, and also giving me exposure to various playing opportunities, such as music festivals that I partook in throughout Canada and the United States. These opportunities were tremendous for my growth as a young musician, and I feel extremely lucky to have had such a generous and passionate teacher like Brian during those times. When I recently received word from Brian that he was going to pass away soon, I made the choice without hesitation to fly from Switzerland, where I'm currently studying, to see him in person one last time. It was quite the emotional trip for both of us, and I noticed it as soon as I was back in Vancouver, driving on the same path to his house, which I was so used to doing during my time studying with Brian. And we chatted for so many hours, and it meant so much for me to be able to see him again and also to thank him for all he's done for me and shaping me into the person I am today. It was also a pleasure of mine to honor his request for donuts from Honey's Donuts in Deep Cove and to have had those with him while reminiscing about our times together. So to Brian, it was such an honor to have been a student of yours, and I thank you so much for all you've done for me.
Hello, my name is Wayne Gaffrere, and I'm here to add a few thoughts to this memorial in honor of Brian. Our fathers were brothers, being the youngest of 2 of 8 siblings. Although we were cousins, I consider Brian to be the brother I never had. Our fathers had 6 of the 8 of our generation's Gaffrere offspring. I met Brian when we were very young, when his family came out to visit the Balcarres homestead, and there are photos of us standing outside my dad's store giggling shyly. I saw him for an extended summer visit in Saskatchewan with his dad in 1958, and then got to see him on a regular basis when we moved to Mission in 1959. In the 1958 Balcarres backdrop, Brian and I used to have a game where we would try to swallow or stop the foam bubbles from escaping as we would add Wrigley's Chiclets to a bottle of Coke. We would try to avoid the explosion from coming out our noses and sides of mouths, and it sometimes backed up, which seemed to go through our eye and ear canals. He never complained, but Brian would meet me on Friday night bus from Mission City as I was playing hockey on the weekend in Newest in 1960. Brian, by this time, had the famous Dennis Brain Mozart horn concertos in his record collection, and this was revolutionary to my young ears. It triggered my lifelong love of classical music and respect and love for the French horn. Upon his and his mother's influence, I attended my first of 2 UBC band camps in 1963. Brian and I spent time together while staying at the relative's Saskatchewan farm in 1965 and discovering the great back roads of the prairies. Brian, by the early 60s, was well on his way to being a musician, being a product of the award-winning New Westminster music system, particularly under the tutelage of Fred Turner. Brian was a member of the National Youth Orchestra of Canada for 5 years. Upon my acceptance into NYO later, I discovered that my last name was already a well-established entity in NYO because of Brian, and I was a proud family member carrying on a musical tradition. Brian's legacy and legendary status continued on as an NYO faculty member for many years. After his Winnipeg tenure, we spent the next 2 years together at UBC playing in the faculty's various ensembles. His first horn playing in the Schumann four-horn Fantasy Stück was extraordinary. Lips on all four players looked like chopped liver. We spent many hours in his basement listening to music, particularly picking out sections of dynamic horn sections in Mahler symphonies, particularly the Ninth Symphony with Barbaroli. Brian liked to drive, and we would spend many hours hitting the main streets of Vancouver in his Volkswagen Beetle. We would sometimes practice our Chinese fire drill occasionally, as well as winding up the car with this huge plastic key suctioned onto the back of the car at major stoplights on Georgia. Memorable privilege to be an usher at his wedding in Winnipeg in spite of minus 40-degree weather. We continued a distant relationship in spite of shifting circumstances and had many visits when I came home. Brian and Laverne came to Australia in the early 2000s, and they had the family distinction of traveling through the middle of a locust or grasshopper storm in the near east of Perth. He was amazed by the experiences, judging by the 2 inches of grasshoppers stacked under the bonnet, the hood. It was great to see that they made the trek down here, and he regretted not being able to visit again. Brian was a very family, history-minded person and taped many hours of relative stories in the early Saskatchewan life on the farm in and around Balcarres. The colorful stories and brilliant live visuals, as well as research into the Gaffer family tree back to the early 1700s with our mainland European roots by Brian, are highly valued family treasures. As his own iconic status, Brian had a wonderful career as a longtime member of the Vancouver Symphony and the CBC Radio Orchestra, both well over 30 years. As all our aunts and uncles and parents are all passionate about music and actively pursued in their formative years, all of this started from our grandfather's zither playing. Succeeding generations should be proud of their ancestors' achievements, and Brian's important legacy will live on through stories, recordings, documentation, personal contact, and a lifelong of valued achievement. Farewell, Brian. You will be sorely missed by your Canadian and Australian family members and never forgotten.
Hi, everyone. I have found in the past that putting pen to paper has helped me to grieve the loss of friends and family. Now, Brian's passing is no different, so to that end, I decided to write a short poem as a memorial to him and our time together, and I hope you enjoy it. So, for Brian. I'd been practicing a ton. It was important, you see. Fourth horn in Vancouver needed filling, and I was hoping they'd choose me. As anyone who's ever taken an audition will know, regardless your prep, you might not reap what you sow. But with my hopes running high and my bank account running low, I bought my ticket, packed my axe, and got ready to go. Vancouver was dismal, cold, wet, and dark. I had traveled from South Carolina, so the contrast was stark. Remaining positive and focused on achieving my goal seemed out of reach in a city where I knew not a soul. Regardless, I pushed on, found the Orpheum, did I? Rain falling steady, clouds filling the sky. As should all who audition, I made sure I wasn't late, then settled in for a long day of hurry up and wait. Round after round, notes and hours came and went. By the end, my emotions and energy were spent. At long last, the day ended, and it was I who still stood. 'Twould be grave understatement to say I felt good. As the staff said congrats, and all headed for home, I discovered quite suddenly that I was alone. There was no one to cheer, nor friend to embrace, no one to witness the joy on my face. But just when I thought my heart might hit the floor, my ear caught the creak of an opening door. Through walked a man with a mustache and smile. Through walked a man with great poise and calm style. He was roughly my height, but had me in years. So glad to see someone, I held back the tears. "I'm Brian," he said, as he reached out his hand. He'd come backstage to welcome me into the band. "We'll be working together," he said, after some time, and somehow I knew everything would be fine. Work together we did, from beginning to end, so much more than a colleague. A great mentor, true friend. And for a kid that moved west and left everything behind, I could not have been luckier to know someone so just and so kind. Now we've played our last notes and the concert's complete. Bow ties off, tucked away, and your horns packed up neat. Metronome is silent, pencil lays still. No need for a scale, let alone a lip trill. The reviews are in now and we all can agree. Your performance was second to none. Legendary. I'll always remember the fun that we had, the support that you gave me through good times and bad, the musical guidance and tips to play horn, the advice that you gave me when my children were born. I hope that one day you and I'll play again, though I can't be sure where and I can't be sure when. One day, though, I'll join the adventure, and then you and I'll make music once more, my dear friend.
Hi, my name is Barry Rector. My wife and I, Merle, have been friends of the Gefrere family for, I think, close to 52 years. We met in St. Andrews Wesley. Laverne was studying with Don Forbes, who I studied with, and she helped me, along with Don, to co-found the British Columbia Boys Choir. Brian was the incredible, affable spouse of Laverne. As you all know, he is an outstanding French horn player, made a career of playing in a symphony. He got those musical roots from his dear mother, Dorothy, who in her own right was an outstanding church organist, piano teacher, and she encouraged him in music. However, when it came to what to do, Brian and her locked horns. So he took up trumpet in school, and no time at all the teacher was saying, "Oh, you're too good to just play trumpet. How about switching to a difficult instrument like the French horn?" Well, he took to it like a duck to water, and, well, history was made. He became a French horn player. When I think of Brian, I think of a guy who, well, B for Brian stands for a man of courage, a brave man who has fought this disease that he's got with fortitude. R, reliable guy. I, an inspiring guy. If I have one regret, it was that he and I never did a work we were going to do of singing Benjamin Britten's Serenade for horn and tenor. Very amicable guy. That's the A in Brian, amicable. A true, wonderful guy. The N stands for naughty. He could be naughty and mischievous, and he loved it with that twinkle in his eye and the wit that he had. G for Gefrere, that's Grandpa. Brian was blessed with 2 daughters, as was I. And I'll never forget, we were invited to dinner at their home out in, the rented home out at Fisherman's Cove. And Laverne was preparing a lovely meal, and we went out. We didn't know what the celebration was. We thought maybe Brian got a solo in the symphony. Well, no, it was to announce to us, his friends, that a baby was on its way. And who that baby was Joanna, who in her own right has gone on to also be a professional musician, one of the outstanding principal flutes in a symphony orchestra in Canada. Paula, I'm sorry I wasn't there. We didn't know about your announcement, but anyway, along came Paula later. The F of Gefrere, that F stands for friendly, for French horn, for focused, true family man, and, as I say, friend. R a little bit of a rebel, a rascal, and an imp. He loved to play jokes and so on. He was an optimist. He was organized. Laverne wouldn't have said he was organized, but he was organized, and he knew where he was going and how he wanted to get there. The rest of his name, Frere, I guess a testament to way back in history when a French background of that last name, Frere. He was a realist. He realized that his illness was progressing at such a rate he couldn't tolerate it, and he certainly didn't want to be a burden or lose all of his dignity. So he was a realist, and he chose maids. Perhaps one of the best things that the Canadian government's ever done for our society is that it gives us a dignified way to get to the big sleep. He was enthusiastic. He was an entertainer. He became an extrovert. He wasn't always, but he became an extrovert. And he was resilient. Brian Gaffrere, my dear friend. I want to tell you a funny story about him. He had to have a private, he had to have a sponsored teacher because he went back to university and got his degree. He became my student teacher at West Van Secondary. And at a time when his humor was still developing, I had a very mischievous drummer who said, Mr. Gaffrere, would you like to hear a drum roll in that part? No, just play what's there. And he kept asking. So finally, Brian said, okay, what's this drum roll? Kid lifted the snare drum off the stand, walked up to the front of the stage, and rolled the drum across the stage. And we both laughed, and I've laughed about that many times since. I went to see Brian last week and to talk over old times. One of the things that Brian really loved was Scotch. And I was even going to bring over, we visited early morning, and I was going to bring over a bottle of Scotch to have a tipple with him. And he said, oh, maybe it's too early yet, Barry. He said, but if you want to have one, he said, just go around the corner. He said, I have a real collection. I walked around the corner, and my gosh, there must have been 8 or 10 bottles still in their original boxes. One he bragged and said, that one's worth $300 a bottle. At any rate, it brought to mind a humorous story. We've been sharing internet jokes for months now through his illness, and one we had a great laugh over was a fellow named Angus called in his friend, and it goes like this. Angus said, McTaggart, as a good friend, I'm coming to the end of me days, and I wonder if I could exact a wee favour out of you as a friend. And what would that be? He said, well, under me bed I've got a finest bottle of single malt Scotch whiskey, and would you go under the bed, get it out, pop the cork, and sprinkle it over me grave for me? Will you do that? I'd do that for you. But I wonder, as a friend, if I could ask a wee favour back in return. And what would that be? McTaggart said, well, I will. I'll get the bottle of whiskey from under your bed. I'll uncork it, and I will sprinkle it over your grave. But I wonder if I could ask you if you would mind if I filter it through my kidneys first. And Brian and I have laughed over that one many a time. I wish I had a glass here that I could hold up to my brave, courageous friend as he's moved on to the great sleep. If I did, it'd be to you, my dear friend. Bon voyage. Love ya.
To you all for that. Now I'd invite Doreen to come forward and offer some remembrances.
Oh, get all caught up here. It's wonderful to see the church so full with so many of Brian's friends and family. Welcome to all of you being here. In the late summer of 2008, I was leaving church after a Sunday service and heard my name called. I turned and it was Brian. He came up the stairs to me and asked if I would like to go for coffee sometime. I said yes. That was the start of a beautiful relationship. Both of us lost our wonderful spouses and had gone through the sorrow that goes along with looking after and losing someone you have loved and been with for many years. We both understood what each other had gone through. Our time together was very easy, with lots of great conversation, good food, and exciting adventures. We had many incredible trips that Brian would carefully plan. Being the perfectionist that he was, Brian would ensure our trips were always ran smoothly, making them very relaxing and worry-free. Brian has a beautiful soul and is a loving person. I say has and is because I very much believe in spirit and that we do live on. It's just that our address changes, as in any other move we make. I feel so fortunate to have had the time with Brian as I did. I will miss him greatly, but pray with all my heart that he is back again with his lovely and wonderful Laverne. I loved Laverne also. She took me under her wing when I first joined the choir, and she was lovely then, and I'm sure she is just as lovely now. May they both go forward together with great joy and happiness. I pray for them both. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. For those of you who don't know, I'm Michael Wall, a colleague and friend of Brian's for more than 45 years. It is an honor to be with you today to celebrate Brian's extraordinary life and what he meant to each of us. I can remember the first conversation I had with Brian in May 1976 when I joined the Vancouver Symphony just before the orchestra went on a cross-Canada tour. Brian introduced himself to me and said that he had heard I had a baby daughter. I responded that yes, our daughter Erin was 6 months old. He happily informed me that he and Laverne had a baby daughter, Paula, who was the same age, and an older daughter, Joanna. We both chuckled and resolved to get our families together very soon. That conversation was the beginning of a long and close friendship, not only for us, but for our families. Brian and I spent a lot, and I mean a lot, of time together. We were both horn players, a small, cliquish, exclusive group of low IQ musicians who play the French horn. We shared the love of that instrument, its unpredictable nature, and the world's great music that we performed. For 25 years, Brian and I sat next to each other in the Vancouver Symphony and the CBC Vancouver Orchestra. I used to joke with Brian that I could always tell what orchestra I was in, even if I was out of sorts, or on the rare occasion, if I was hungover, because if he was to my right, we were in the VSO. If he was on my left, we were in the CBC Orchestra. I'm not going to elaborate a lot on what a superb musician Brian was. I'm sure many will cover that more thoroughly today. But I will say that working and playing with Brian was a real treat. Brian had a beautiful tone, superb intonation, and excellent musicianship. As a second horn player, I always appreciated how easy it was to match our sounds together and to play in tune. That's not always the case with some musicians. When I think of Brian, however, what I remember most was his humor, his joyfulness, his love of family, and his unwavering friendship. It always seemed that we were joking, sometimes in a self-deprecating manner, or we were laughing at our predicament as horn players. We poked fun at each other. No matter if we were on the receiving end or dishing it out, we always laughed with complete abandonment. Brian's humor was extensive, and he found an outlet by making 40th birthday roast videos of his friends. Chris Millard, Rich Mingus, and I were among his victims. And the organizational time he took, not only to edit and direct the videos, but to arrange all our friends to make cameo appearances in the videos, must have taken him hours and hours. Who but a true friend would take on such projects? I knew that Brian was not going to miss an opportunity like my 40th birthday for his mischievous humor. On the very early morning of my birthday, Suzanne and I were having coffee in our front room with a large picture window. Imagine my shock and surprise when the VSO horn section gradually rose up one at a time outside that window and played Happy Birthday to me, and I am sure to the astonishment of my neighbors. That was the prelude to my 40th birthday roast video, which he presented to me and we all watched. I thought I had survived the surprise, but no, he and Suzanne had collaborated on a large party which took place later that day and included more of his shenanigans. Brian simply said at the end of the day, "Gotcha." When we start out in life, we often do not take into account the struggles that lie before us. We tend to hope and believe that we will not face disappointments and tragedies. Of course, life is not like that. I have come to realize that we cannot expect to only have positive things happen to us in life. Most of us will experience negative ones too. The true measure of a person is how he or she faces those negatives. As we all know, Brian faced more than his share. When we spoke in the intervening months and years after his ALS diagnosis, never once did I hear any hint of self-pity or despair. Instead, he faced down life's ultimate challenge, our own mortality, with dignity, grace, and courage. He was a truly remarkable man. The Friday before Brian passed, we spoke for 45 minutes on the phone. We said our goodbyes and how our lives were enriched by our friendship. We reminisced on many of the things we had done together, the laughs we had had, the notes we had played, the places we had been, and the things we did together. We discussed how life doesn't always work out the way we would like it to. We discussed our recent loss of loved ones. And then I simply told him that he had lived a good, meaningful life, had a beautiful family with Laverne, and they had raised two extraordinary daughters who will undoubtedly pass on the Gaffrey legacy to his grandchildren. I have been lucky and blessed in my life to have many close friendships, of which Brian's was at the top. My life would not have been as full had it not been for our friendship. I will miss him forever. Farewell, old buddy, and safe journey.
Oh, hello. I was saying, I'd love to see all y'all, but if we could stop doing this at my family's funerals, that would be fantastic, because there's been a lot. So I'm glad to see so much laughter here today. As has been mentioned, Dad loved a good joke, and some of you might not have understood David's reference in that video there, that the last words Dad uttered in this life was a joke. He was listening to the music, he said goodbye to us, he said goodbye music, and then he said, maybe I'll have to play the harp from now on. And so that were the very last words my father ever said. So at least I know what I'm gonna get tattooed to match my mom's final words on this arm. When you have to eulogize both parents and your grandmother in under 4 years, it gives a lot of opportunity for reflection. Writing Mom's eulogy was painful but easy because she and I were incredibly close. Grandma's was relatively easy because she lived to be 103, so there was just a lot of material to choose from there. And plus, she and I, as Barry mentioned, we were kind of like this at times too, so that was a bit amusing. But Dad's, this is actually the hardest because you can kind of break our relationship into the 40 years prior to ALS and then the last 6 years. And I think a lot of you will know this. It goes back to the insanity of being a child of a professional musician and the schedule that that entails. So our family was busy, and not like my family where kids are in hockey and you work 9 to 5. And when I was we're going through all Dad's stuff. And oh, if you're looking for a receipt from Boston Pizza from 12 years ago, I have it, because he did not throw out anything. I have every Safeway receipt, every taxi receipt, I have everything, so just in case you needed that for some reason. But he also had every day planner, and the front of each was written $20 reward if returned. And so here's an example of a day in the Gaffreur household in 1990. Oh, and my mom was away on a 3-week tour, so this was all Dad. So 7 a.m., Paul at a physio in Lonsdale. 8:30 a.m., Paul at a school at Handsworth. 10 a.m., morning rehearsal, which was downtown. 12:30, pick up Paul at school and drive to gymnastics. Go back downtown for afternoon rehearsal. Go back to the North Shore, pick up Joanna, drive Joanna to the Vancouver Academy of Music, back in Vancouver, drive back to the North Shore, pick up Paula from gymnastics, take home, drive back over town to Academy, pick up Joanna, and go perform at the VSO in the evening concert. Home at 10:30. So that was a day in our life growing up. My most vivid memories of dinner are grabbing a lovingly saran-wrapped plate out of the fridge and sticking it in the microwave for 2 minutes and eating on my own, because we just did not have any time to do chit-chat over family dinners. It wasn't our thing. So it was a loving, oh my God, the most loving home you could imagine, but we just didn't have a heck of a lot of time with each other. Like, God, you and I didn't really spend any time together. So yeah, if I had to give this eulogy 6 years ago, it probably would have been mainly focused on funny stories about Dad's idiosyncrasies, which there were quite a few. So, and let's go over a few of them now, just for a bit of fun here. So, Dad had a very extensive vocabulary, which he loved using, writing letters to the editor, which were quite embarrassing as a teenager. Once he wrote when he was complaining about the behavior of the band Blind Melon, but he referred to them as a visually impaired fruit instead of blind melon. In another article in The Sun, the reporter quoted a response to a question that Dad gave when asked what CBC executives said in a meeting. His only word, bafflegab. So I'm quite sure the reporter only quoted him that one word because she wanted to use it in an article. Dad could also drive us crazy with his need to photograph every single moment of our lives. In one case, Dad drove me to some provincial rugby trial or something, and when he dropped me off, he proceeded to park the car and get out, at which point I said, "What are you doing?" And he said he was coming to take pictures. And I said, no, you're not going to embarrass me sitting in the stands taking pictures. So we're partway through, and my friend Lakin goes to me, "Hey, Paula, isn't that your dad?" And I went, "Oh God, where?" And she goes, "Over there, in the bushes." He was, true story, he was hiding in the bushes taking pictures, which would not fly today, but back then it was just a little bit strange. As Mike mentioned, birthdays and Christmas were incredibly important to Dad. He spent hours and hours on presents and thinking of unique gifts, and he actually did give me the best present I've ever received. The year that Joanna's first solo CD came out, I was 18 or 19, and Dad was concerned I would feel, left out. Also, there was someone in our family, let's call her Grandma, who was quite disappointed I hadn't followed the family tradition of being a musician. So what he did, I opened the present, and it was a CD entitled Paula Gaffreur and Friends, with the recording of all of my band and orchestra work as a teenager. It was the sweetest present I've ever received in my entire life. Whew. And finally, a lot of you will know Dad loved rules and regulations more than anyone I've ever met in my life. Well, we're pretty sure in a previous life he was a bylaw officer. One time he put a tape recorder on the deck of their house because he was positive the decibel level of the skateboarders riding out front was over the City of North Vancouver limits for sound. And another time he took a video of a neighbor idling a car because the rules in the complex did not allow car idling. The rules were meant to be followed. That was Dad. So 6 years ago, my eulogy probably would have ended here. But if there's anything good as a result of these diseases, or main disease that we've dealt with these last 6 years, it's that it created a new relationship between Dad and I. When Mom was sick and I would call home, his 3 most frequent words were no longer, "Here's your mother," as he passed the phone over, He became mine and Joanna's main contact and the focus of our little circle of 3 that looked after Mom. And when she died, Dad filled in for her with gusto. I think he had to ask the kids' birthdays, but he did ask them and never forgot one. Always sent amazing presents to the kids, came out for wonderful trips with us on a regular basis. And then horribly with his own illness these past 2 years, and especially these last 2 months when I took leave from work to spend half my time here, I feel like I finally really got to know him. Dad was a man of courage. I hadn't really known that. My dad was a man with a wicked sense of humor that I hadn't really paid attention to before. And my dad was someone who wouldn't give up. He set little goals. He was given 6 months to live almost exactly a year ago. First, he wanted to see Trump leave the White House. Check. He wanted to see his 76th birthday. Check. He wanted to feel the summer sun on his face. Check. And then he wanted to see the Blue Jays in the playoffs. So that was a heartbreaking one. It got so close. One of my favorite things was he would text my husband and I during Blue Jays games. He was a man that hated the fact that he needed to call out in the middle of the night to have one of us adjust him in bed because his body wouldn't let him move anymore. He loved to call me his big, strong girl. I let the big part slide, considering he didn't have much time left. Otherwise, I would have given him, you know what, over that. Because I was the only one that could actually pick him up. I could actually physically pick my dad up and move him from chair to bed without using that stupid lift he hated so very much. And he was a man that loved his family fiercely and did not want us to continue to see him suffer. Sorry. Truly, in the last year of his life, I learned more about him and became closer than I had in the 45 years prior. It was the only gift of my parents' illnesses and the care that they needed. This debilitating, awful disease. It gave us time together. I miss taking care of him. I miss watching Blue Jays with him. Sorry, oh dear Lord, that's not gonna look good on video. I miss watching Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy with him every night. I also learned so much through all of you these past few weeks, your calls and emails and texts. Sitting next to him as he had you on speakerphone, I heard about so many things I had no idea about. Tales from high school, National Youth Orchestra and university, how much he meant to you all, and how brave you all thought he was, and what a kind and generous, oh dear Lord, teacher and colleague he was. When I think about my dad and my mom, the thing that keeps sticking in my head is one of my favorite kids' movies from the past decade, the live-action Cinderella. In that, of course, Cinderella loses both of her parents and is raised by her evil stepmother. But it's the words of wisdom from her parents that allowed her to continue when she was scared, when she was faced with a difficult decision, or when she needed strength. Those words that she recalled and lived by were, have courage and be kind. When I think of my dad, I think that those are the lessons that he taught me the most, that I'll teach to my kids, and that I'll repeat to myself in difficult times. Have courage and be kind. And my dad did both of those with honor and love, right up until his final breath and his final joke.
Hello, everyone, here and at home. Thank you for being with us to celebrate our dad's life today. In the week before I came to Vancouver to be with Dad in his final days, I had a moment of reflection while backstage in Ottawa getting ready for a concert. As I assembled my instrument, changed into my heels, and went on with my usual routine, something made me pause. It was the sound of the harp tuning on stage, a familiar pre-concert sound for any orchestral musician. But something about that sound hit me in a deep way, and it made me think about the world I shared with my dad. We shared a deep love for our family. Holiday celebrations and gatherings were always special as we were growing up, with Mom creating beautiful meals and welcoming many to join our table. Sharing a similar sense of humor became a regular thing when Dad introduced me at a young age to the caustic wit of Fawlty Towers and Blackadder. While Paula was the athlete in our family with her gymnastics and rugby, my dad and I shared a love of the ski slopes. But the foremost aspect of my life that I shared with my dad was music. The world that I live in, the world of the orchestra, the life of a professional classical musician is so connected with my dad for me, and I owe so much of this life I love to him. I remember having a moment of revelation at a very early age, noticing that instead of leaving for work with a briefcase, as I saw other parents doing on television, my dad left for work with his French horn case. It was a bit of a light bulb turning on for me that playing an instrument could actually be work. Later, as a teenager, I realized that this work could be profound and immensely satisfying. Once I had decided to follow his path into a professional musical life, after many cautionary talks about the difficulty of the business, he did everything in his power to ensure that I had the best chance of success. The best teachers, the right training, a good instrument, and of course, excellent advice from him. The kind of advice that could be applied to life in general, not just orchestra playing. Don't ever assume that you are right when there are problems with intonation or ensemble. Always be polite and respectful to your colleagues. These are lifelong relationships that you need to take care of. Don't ever phone it in. Every concert is important. Dad was always there as a sounding board for me when I had any issues or challenges in my workplace, musical or otherwise, and I will miss being able to ask him for his guidance. His example and his integrity will always be with me. Brian was a great dad. Carolyn Christie, a retired second flutist with the Montreal Symphony, loves to tell the story of when she first met my dad many years ago. They chatted for a while, and the conversation eventually turned to me and my flute playing as an aspiring student. Carolyn says that he pulled a cassette tape of mine out of his pocket that he just happened to have with him for her to listen to. In her books and in mine, that made him the best dad ever. It was always a bit of a thrill to see Dad performing and to see him in that professional role, different than just being Dad at home. He got us in backstage at the Orpheum to meet Big Bird when we were little kids and Michael J. Fox when we were teenagers. He would do anything for his girls. Our mom was often away on tour with the Vancouver Chamber Choir in October, November, so Halloween costumes fell to Dad, and he loved the challenge. He got quite good with makeup and helping create our outfits, the most memorable one being Paula as a pair of dice. It was pretty cool. Dad's tours to Japan with the VSO made him pretty exotic as a suburban dad in North Vancouver in the 1970s. None of my friends' families ate sushi at that time, especially not in a tatami room at the Aki, a traditional Japanese restaurant on Pender Street downtown. He used to love to gross Paula and me out by eating the octopus with all its tentacles. Of course, we learned very young how to use chopsticks and loved the whole experience. Dad would bring us back presents from these tours by saving most of his per diem eating local street food, which he preferred to hotel food anyways. Happy coats, kimonos, and electronics would be lovingly pulled out of the suitcase for us upon his return. He always had an interest in photography, inherited from his own father. And I remember early years in our house on Eddystone, where the downstairs bathroom was used as a darkroom, mainly to develop beautiful prints of his family. Later, a video camera entered the picture, and he took on projects such as creating elaborate birthday videos for his friends, as well as generally following his two daughters around, documenting all of our gymnastics meets, sporting events, concerts, and family holidays. And rugby, yes. This was often to our chagrin and embarrassment at the time, but I now genuinely look forward to viewing the big box of videotapes we found at his house. Of course, they're all beta tapes. But he still has the beta player. Dad never stopped believing in the superiority of beta over VHS, and in fact, brought it up again just a couple of evenings before he died. He was a man of strong opinions, and he stuck to them. Dad loved little sports cars that he could tinker with, first MGBs, then MGAs. I used to love the odd occasion when he would pick me up at my high school in his red MGA, so low to the ground and curvy, with the wires you had to pull from the inside to open the door. It was so cool. Paula and I went to many MG meets with Dad, lots of memories, dealing with snap-on plastic roofs in the incessant Vancouver rain. Also, Paula and I sitting on the back shelf of the MGB with no seatbelts, tooling around Vancouver Island. We got to know the distinct tone of each of these cars, and we could hear him coming up the hill late at night after playing a concert. This was our cue to jump into bed if we had a babysitter who had let us stay up late. Later, for a short time, he had a Porsche, and then finally decided that Miatas were best. All the fun without the tinkering. He was done with that part. Last summer, Dad parted with his last Miata as my husband and son drove it back to Ottawa, where it now lives. When I drive it, I experience some of that same joy he always had with those little cars. Driving with Dad. We spent many hours driving and stuck in traffic jams together, him getting me to and from the Vancouver Academy of Music mostly, where we reduced our traffic anxiety by listening to Disc Drive or to his latest CBC recording of Schubert, Respighi, Poulenc, or Mozart. These were great opportunities to talk about anything and everything, and for me to learn about music, the orchestral literature, and orchestral life. Paula and I really hit the jackpot as far as parents go. We always felt incredibly loved and cherished. We were encouraged to do our best, and we were expected to be good, kind people. We were fully supported in our goals and dreams, and we were told that our possibilities in life were limitless. When I began working with the NAC Orchestra in Ottawa in 1992, many of my new colleagues were my parents' age and had known them back in the National Youth Orchestra. I often was referred to as Guff's daughter. There was so much genuine affection for my parents that I was taken care of like a family member. One of my greatest joys in life was having the opportunity to work with my father in Ottawa in my own orchestra. After Dad retired from the VSO in 2008, he had a lot more time on his hands, and he still sounded great. I can't remember how it all started, but it must have been that he was coming to visit me during a week where we needed extra horns on a particular concert, and he ended up getting hired as an extra. The NACO horn section loved him so much that it started to become a regular thing, and his visits to me in Ottawa sometimes would be planned around our bigger concerts of Mahler and Bruckner when a large horn section was required. I knew at the time that having the opportunity to work together in this way was a very special thing for us both, and I tried to really soak up these moments. We even got to go on tour together to Atlantic Canada in 2011. It was so wonderful to have him as my tour buddy, having all our meals together, getting out to sightsee a bit, hanging out in the hotel bar post-concert. Even schlepping our suitcases around from hotel to bus to plane was fun and a shared adventure. I treasure all of these memories. As the tributes have come in for Dad from all over the world, there are many sentiments that keep reappearing, that Dad was one of the good ones, an excellent colleague, a man of conviction and great integrity, a horn player who had a beautiful, ideal horn sound, a great and generous musician and friend, a kind and wonderful man, and an exceptional human being. One person told me that my dad was the guy you want to talk to in the brass section if you were coming in as a young player. And another called him an expert guide for a young musician, a supportive, inspiring, and generous mentor. One comment I've heard consistently throughout his career is that he was such a tasteful and elegant horn player, always favoring musicality over brashness or ego. I respect him so much for that. He was equally at home in a wind quintet as he was in a horn section, and I think the sweet spot for him was his position as principal horn in the CBC Vancouver Orchestra, a chamber orchestra where he could contribute his particular voice in a significant way. He was so proud of the many recordings that they made for CBC, some of which you are hearing today. Every recording you'll hear today actually features Brian. He's playing in all of them. Dad was also very active in the commercial music scene in Vancouver. You may have heard him in a movie score, an episode of MacGyver, or in the soundtrack for a commercial. In the days before answering machines, I often would answer the phone and take down a message for my dad when someone would call him for a jingle. Dad was very proud of a recording session he did with Olivia Newton-John in 1977 for her album, Making a Good Thing Better, especially his solo at the end of Don't Cry for Me, Argentina. but so beautiful. Dad was an excellent horn teacher. He sometimes struggled with the idea of training musicians to enter a world that looked professionally bleak at times, with so few jobs available. However, when he was invited to teach at the National Youth Orchestra of Canada in 2008, to coach the top horn students in Canada, he devoted himself fully to their training. He cared deeply, and this showed in his dedication to the work. I was told by Barbara Smith once that he went above and beyond anyone else when judging the students' audition tapes, listening to them numerous times through various rounds of elimination and taking copious notes to pass on to every candidate so that they could learn as much as possible from the experience. The NYO kept him on for 8 years, and he stepped down when he felt he had given all he could and just didn't have the energy anymore to continue with that same level of commitment. During these last 2 years, as Dad started to recognize the symptoms of ALS and then finally was diagnosed, he often reminded us that he had had 25 extra years. It seems like ancient history now, but Dad was diagnosed with terminal cancer in 1995, which he managed to overcome. He felt like a very lucky man, and he was grateful to have had that extra quarter century, seeing Paula and me grow into happy adults, marry, and have our own children. He loved being a grandpa. My son Tarquin, when he was a toddler, used to call him Grandpa Lion, not yet being able to pronounce his B's. I always thought this was a very fitting name for my dad. For me, the one silver lining of this awful pandemic that we are all living through, with my work as a performer being shut down for long periods of time, was that I was able to spend long stretches with Dad, the kind of time I have not had with him for 30 years. On the occasions when I was performing in Ottawa, Dad was able to watch my concerts online, and this, along with watching Blue Jays games and regular Zoom chats with family and friends, gave him a bit of a schedule to look forward to, even as he became more and more confined and his life more limited. I knew that at the end of each of these live stream concerts, there would be several texts from Dad giving me his opinions and thoughts on the performance and sending screenshots of me and my colleagues. I will miss knowing that he is there, watching, listening, and thinking about it all. In the days before Dad's passing, he said some pretty amazing things. The day before he died, as the care worker was trying to move him, he quipped, "I'm still in the driver's seat." And he truly was. He was calling the shots as much as he possibly could with this terrible disease, every step of the way. He used a cane until he absolutely needed a walker, and then the walker until he absolutely needed a wheelchair, and so on. Anything he could still manage to do himself, he did. He lived as fully as he could until he reached a point where he felt his body could not continue, and then he died with dignity. The sheer number of phone calls, visits, and notes Dad received over these past few weeks, as word started to spread about his decision, was overwhelming. It was exhausting for Dad, not only physically, but emotionally, to say goodbye to everyone, but it made him feel very loved. It has become apparent to me and Paula just how respected and loved our dad was, and I heard that word love a lot. People loved my dad, they really did, and they thankfully had a chance to let him know how they felt. We will all miss you deeply, Dad. We hope you are with Mom now, both of you able to freely dance, sing, and make music once again. We're now going to see a slideshow accompanied by 2 recordings featuring our dad. The first selection is one of the Brahms songs for horns, harp, and women's chorus, with Dad on horn, Rita Costanzi on harp, and the women of the Vancouver Chamber Choir, including our mother. And this will be followed by the hymn to Diana from Benjamin Britten's Serenade for Tenor, Horn, and Strings, with Dad, the great tenor Ben Heppner, and the CBC Radio Orchestra.
And hundreds chaste and fair, not the sun is laid to sleep, seated in one silver chair, state important matter keep. Hesperus entreats thy light, Hesperus entreats thy light, goddess, 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 excellently great. Earth, let not thy anger shake, dare itself to interpose, since your shining orb was made, him to glee when day did close. Bless us then with wish and sight, bless us then with wish and sight, goddess, 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 excellently bright. Lay thy bow of pearl apart, and thy crystal shining quiver, give unto the flying heart space to breathe out truth so ever. Thou that makes the day of night, thou that makes the day of night, thou that makes, goddess, 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 excellently bright.
Well, thank you all for giving such tender and beautiful attention to your memories of Brian, to your relationship with Brian, and leading us all in celebrating his life by sharing your memories. Such a rich blessing. Now I invite you to sing, stand as you're able, and sing a scripture reading, Psalm 23, that Brian chose for this time. Well, it really is an awesome thing to think that 76 years ago, this past May, a sound emerged in Balcarres, Saskatchewan, that had never been heard before. The cry of a newborn Brian Gaffrere. A unique sound with borrowed tones and color from family heritage and the place of birth. He, like all of us, learned to use his God-given breath and the uniqueness of the way that God had made him to affect the world around him in the production of sound. He created beauty with his sound. He joined with others and made a life out of what happens when we gather and make sound together. A way that sets vibrations and waves that change the way you feel and help you touch something deep inside. That sound came to an end the other day, like it will for all of us. And yet, do you still sense the waves continuing? I've had the privilege to walk with Brian this last piece of the journey. And as you all know, Brian was very forthright about his journey. He was quite philosophical about his illness, saying more than once to me that he beat cancer 25 years ago, and so the rest is bonus. At the same time, he wanted more. But even more deeply, he wanted for his life to have meant something. So as students circulated over the last few weeks and months, and friends gathered on Zoom to remember and reflect, and most importantly, as the people he loved spent so much time together, I think Brian knew that his life had meant something really significant, deep, and lasting. It's partly that he put sound out into the universe and it changed the people around him. It was also that he put love and fun and friendship out into the universe and it changed the people around him. Brian and I talked theology a little. He was smart and astute, and he was a funny combination of impatient whenever theology and church got too pretentious and self-important on the one hand, and also kind of traditional on the other. Don't give me any of those hand drums with their boom, 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 boom. Sit down on that organ and let her rip with a proper piece of music. So I have no flowery words with which to send Brian off. He wouldn't like that. But I would simply say, thanks be to God for the voice that broke through into the world 76 years ago. Thanks be to God for the breath and for the blessings that flowed from that breath, and the beauty and the humor and the naughtiness and the love. Thanks be to God for the promise that any note played with love will make a difference. Thanks be to God for the promise that our lives do indeed matter. Thanks be to God for Brian. Let us pray. Holy One, in whom we live and move and have our being, great divine composer of our lives, it is a wonder to behold the life and character of Brian Gaffrer. And we give you thanks for his life. And we pray for the grace to let him go humbly, trusting in your everlasting embrace. Let your love, O God, eclipse the hurt that clings so close with the loss of Brian. Let your grace create a symphony of gratitude for everything in Brian that was good and kind and faithful. We give thanks for his strength of character that helped him all through his life, and especially in the last few years allowed him to find strength and hope and peace. We are grateful, O God, for the network of community and compassion and music that laid a foundation for his creative life and supported him through his illness. We pray for his family and friends who must now let him go and carry on, for Joanna and Thor and Paula and Lauren, and for Luke and Olivia and Tarquin, and his sweetheart Doreen. Hear our prayer for his extended family and wide circle of friends and music makers. Give them all strength as they rearrange their world with the loss of Brian. And give them peace, knowing a love that is not bound by death, but whose waves continue to ripple through life. O God of resurrection hope, holy mystery at the heart of life, lift us now out of the shadows of our grief, and let a song of gratitude guide us into the coming days and weeks and months, we pray, through the grace of Christ. Amen. The other hymn that Brian asked to have here, and he chose even down to the verses, was Abide With Me. Let us stand together as we are able and sing Abide With Me. Please be seated because we are going to give Brian the last word.
Well, hello everyone. This is Brian Gaffer speaking to you from October of 2013. If you're seeing this, that means that you're at my funeral. Sorry I can't be there with you, but you know how it is. That's the way these things work. So this is by way of a little explanation of this clip that's coming up, a song that's special to me. I first started thinking about what I wanted on my funeral back in 1995 when I had my cancer, and wrote out a few things, and it was mostly very classical. Well, hello everyone. This is Brian Gaffer speaking to you from October of 2013. If you're seeing this, that means that you're at my funeral. Sorry I can't be there with you, but you know how it is. That's the way these. Well, hello everyone. This is Brian Gaffer speaking to you from October of 2013. If you're seeing this, that means that you're at my funeral. Sorry I can't be there with you, but you know how it is. That's the way these things work. So this is by way of a little explanation of this clip that's coming up, a song that's special to me. I first started thinking about what I wanted on my funeral back in 1995 when I had my cancer, and wrote out a few things, and it was mostly very classical and horn-centric. I wanted certain pieces played and maybe a few people to play. Things have evolved a little bit since then. And one of the things that happened was that I went to quite a number of the Universal Gospel Choir concerts that Laverne was singing in the choir, and Diane was playing, and Tony was doing the sound. Anyway, there was this one singer there that really, really impressed me, doing some great rock and roll, Linda Luja. And I got this idea that I would like her to sing at my funeral. Not only to sing a song that I thought was appropriate, but also to shake up everybody a little bit who was expecting only horn and classical music excerpts. Anyway, this particular song, I think, addresses what I need to say in terms of continuing my journey. In that, even though I'm a believer, I have not necessarily been a great attendee at services. So this song, Operator, Get Me Jesus, I think is something that will help me move along to the next plane. So, glad you could come and hope you enjoy this.
Oh, operator, information, give me Jesus on the line. Oh, operator, information, I'd like to speak to a friend of mine. Oh, prayer is a number, faith is the exchange, heaven is the street, Jesus is his name. Oh, operator, information, give me Jesus on the line. Oh, operator, information, why? Oh, yeah, operator, information, trying to tell me what number to call. Oh, my mother used this number when I was very small, and every time she dialed it, she always got the call. Oh, operator, information, give me Jesus on the line. information. Give me Jesus on the line. Operator, information. Please connect me with the man. Don't worry about the money. You know I'll pay the charge. Just put me on the line. I'm calling from my heart. Oh, operator, information. Give me Jesus on the line. Oh, give me Jesus on the line, line, line. Give me Jesus. On the line.
Him into God's care. Let us pray. You only are immortal, O God. We are mortal, formed of earth, and to earth we all return. These foundations for life you laid at the beginning of time, saying you are dust, and to dust you shall return. All of us go down to the dust, and yet even at the graveside we make a song, and that song is Alleluia. Into your hands, great source of all life, we commend our beloved Brian. Receive him into the arms of your mercy, into the great company of the saints, in light